Welcome to the Idle Talk podcast. My name is Peyton, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Jacob. This week, we are finally discussing the finale of Survivor 48 and really the entirety of this season. So if you have not seen the finale yet or seen Survivor 48, this is your spoiler warning because we're about to talk about the finale and the entire season and break down the season as a whole, talk about the winner. We've ranted about the season a good bit over the last few episodes, so I don't plan on doing too much of the same. But we do need to tie a nice little bow on the season, and then we'll move on real quick, and then hopefully jump right into Survivor 49 as soon as possible. Jacob, how do you feel about this resolution to what was a interesting season?
I will say, I think Kyle is a great winner.
Mm-hmm.
My feelings about the season as a whole and the way it was edited aside, I think Kyle was very deserving, and I am happy with how that worked out. So, as far as the finale is concerned, I am very happy with the way that the season has resolved itself. I also loved that we finally got the first season of the new era to not have a 0-vote finalist. I thought that was very fun. But I don't have much more positive things to say besides that. I liked Samotion.
Yeah, I'm always excited to have Samotion back. First of all, I agree. I think Kyle is easily second best winner of the new era. I think that he cements himself as being second best only to, underneath, I think, D.
Mm-hmm. In my opinion, I think there's room for discussion. I don't think it's set in stone that D is better than Kyle. I think D is most likely the better winner.
I think D is pretty clearly the better winner. I would need to see a pretty compelling argument both against D and for Kyle for me to want to put Kyle above D, because I think that Kyle is the second best winner of the new era. But I think if we're also looking at all Survivor winners, I think that there's probably a tier gap on where I put Kyle and D on that list, potentially. And so that's something that
well, we'll talk about that later.
Doesn't matter too much right now. But I do think
list.
Kyle, very good winner. I think Kamilla would have been an even better winner if Kamilla made it to the end. I think if Kamilla wins, Kamilla's best winner of the new era, probably is actually where I would put her if she ends up making it to the final three. Because if she makes it to the final three, I think she wins, and I think she wins in a landslide. I don't think it's close.
Oh, I think it would have been unanimous.
Yeah, I think maybe there's one dissenting vote in Cedric, because Cedric continues to perplex. And I think he maybe throws the one vote to Joe still for some reason. That makes no sense, but
for the kids,
yeah,
Peyton.
Whatever, man. But I think that Kamilla would probably I would very much consider putting Kamilla at or maybe above D. At the very least, I would put them in the same tier of all-time Survivor winners, because I do think that her game as a whole was, if she wins, I think that it is a very, very, very strong win.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously she did not win. So I think the way we talk about this finale, we go from Final 5, Final 4, Final 3. Final 5, Mitch is the vote out. No surprises here.
I'm not surprised that Mitch went home. I mean, it was spoiled, but I would have guessed that Mitch went home anyways. I will say I'm not surprised that Mitch went home. I'm surprised by their reasoning that he was the biggest threat to win.
I agree. And this is one of those things that it kind of comes back to again and again, the editing of this season being really terrible, because everyone there seemed to believe that Mitch had the jury in the palm of his hand.
Mm-hmm.
And I can understand a little bit Kyle and Kamilla thinking that if Mitch is there with either of them, he could cannibalize Siva votes. And so it hurts their probability of winning. So I think that there's some chance there. I don't understand Joe feeling like Mitch beats him, or even Eva feeling like Mitch beats her, because they feel like they've played these really honorable games. So unless they're aware of the fact that everyone on the jury hates their guts and they think that everyone would just rage vote against them and vote for Mitch, I don't know. It's hard for me to understand why everyone out there thinks Mitch was such a threat to win. And Jeff even says in the aftermath of Tribal,
I think Mitch is going to be some people's favorite player of the new era.
Yeah, and like that he would have won the whole thing, which I think a lot of people are really going to love you, Mitch. And first of all, a great argument to have that reunion be live, because Jeff would never say that if it was live.
Yeah,
because that and does not age well.
Yeah, and given what has been said online during the show,
that line does not age well. I'm kind of surprised they didn't edit that out when looking at the final edit of this episode and then going to air with it, because you can make those sort of changes. I'm kind of surprised they kept that in, but whatever. I just think the impression of everyone on the island, including that of Jeff, is just so different from what they showed us. And it just comes back to we're not seeing the same thing that they're showing. And I think we were just fed a very different portrayal of what actually went down. And that makes it hard to really know what this season even was. Because what everyone experienced on the island is not what we saw.
Mm-hmm.
Because even based on post-game interviews and stuff.
Yeah, the amount of stuff that was revealed, there was a list. I want to see if I can find the list on Reddit while we're talking about it.
Yeah, but it was crazy.
The amount of stuff that the contestants have said happened on the island, it feels like the way they edited it was attempting to fabricate a narrative that did not happen on the island.
Yes, which I think...
I found the post.
Yeah,
do you want me to go ahead and read all the things, or...
Yes, I would like to read through them, but I think before we say that, I think that all of these things, because I did see this, I think this all very much contributes to why this season felt weird. Because the editing, it wasn't just like they forgot how to edit. It was they were intentionally editing it for some other motivation. They were editing it to tell a narrative that did not exist, or to heighten a narrative that didn't exist to that extent, if that makes sense. And so because of that, I think that is part of why the season felt so weird, is because they were clearly trying to tell a different story than what actually happened.
Yeah. So this is a really long Reddit post, so I'll try to condense it as much as possible.
And maybe just like pick and choose the ones that are the most crucial.
So it's after this person on Reddit compiled. Oh, and they predicted Kyle was going to win. Good job. This person compiled all of the information that had come out in the postseason press that makes us take issue with the way that the season was edited. Yeah. So apparently David was Kyle's number one until the swap. He didn't lock his alliance with Kamilla until David boot. Kyle's emotional heart wavering was due to the fact that he was closer with Joe and Eva than Kamilla, apparently. Joe and Shaheen had a huge falling out during Shaheen's boot. Mary was one of Eva's closest friends on the island, apparently, hence her vote for Eva. Mitch was viewed as one of the biggest jury threats because Kyle and Kamilla feared he would obtain Siva votes, and Joe and Eva thought that he was the likable underdog who didn't have any blood from the jury on his hands. Star initially disliked Eva, but Star felt Eva was rude, while Eva had no idea that Star had a problem with her. This was resolved, and Star understood the reasons for Eva's bluntness. Star was playing hard and spread misinformation at every given opportunity. Eva took this personally as Star was lying to her too. Kamilla would have beaten anyone at Final Tribal, and Kamilla correctly read this throughout the post-merge. The only person she ever thought she could beat her is Kyle, but thought Mitch might also steal votes. Kamilla admits she only managed to stay in the game due to Kyle being the level-headed one of the duo. Mary was viewed as one of the most aggressive players and one of the biggest threats to win due to her underdog story and her attempt to infiltrate the strong alliance. And it says, and the biggest and most important ones. No one ever considered targeting Eva with her advantages because Eva was a predictable player that would only ever use her advantages to save herself or Joe. Taking out Eva with advantages in her pocket would cause them to be rehidden and open up the game for anybody else to make a huge move. And I totally get that now, but why not say that? Because that was the biggest frustration.
Someone had to have had a conversation about that with someone else, or said that in a confessional. I just think, or if someone's not saying that in a confessional, it's your job as a producer to ask them questions to get them to tell you that. Eva has all this stuff. As a producer, you should be asking them. I understand you can't be putting ideas in their head, but you can, in conversation with them in confessionals, you're asking questions to get them to go through their thinking. You could get them to the point where they explain that reasoning.
Mm-hmm.
So that way we get those confessionals.
And then the last one is Joe was drawing dead the minute he preached honesty and integrity. This was a cast that favored gameplay, and Kamilla says the jury reactions anytime Joe mentioned honesty and integrity made it very clear that jurors were being rubbed the wrong way. Hence her jury management comment at one of the early post-merge tribals. In my opinion, it was very much not shown that was rubbing the jury the wrong way. It was the way the season was edited was this honesty and integrity alliance was the best thing ever, and it was the highlight of the season. It was not shown to be a negative connotation from the perspective of the jury.
Yeah.
And which makes sense now why Joe only got one vote, but I was going in thinking Joe was the front runner. I didn't want him to win, but the way that the season was edited made me think he was.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so bizarre that they almost shoehorned the edit to try and make it feel like a more old school season, even though that wasn't the season that was actually playing out most of the time. And so I think most of our gripes with the season come down to editing more than anything. I think most of the time when there were gameplay moves or lack thereof, there was thought behind them. We just never got to hear why they were doing that. And so anytime we were upset at a player or upset at a situation or upset at whatever, it seems like it almost always was the fault of the editors and the way that they were stitching the season together and telling this narrative in a way where they were just leaving out so much context for us to really see the whole picture. And I understand you can't always show everything, but there's a difference between not being able to show everything and just misrepresenting what happened on the island.
Everything that I've been seeing online is people saying, you want old Survivor back, but this season is what old Survivor is. And I completely disagree. I've seen old Survivor, not all of old Survivor, not as much as you have, but the old Survivor that I have seen is way more entertaining than this, in my personal opinion, at least in some capacity. I obviously, lack of twists and advantages can make it a little stale, where you solely have to focus on the people's relationships. But to some extent, that's kind of how it is in the new era. With everything being the same, the only thing we have to distinguish these seasons from each other is the cast.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is reflective of the old era in that way. So by saying that this season, like people asking for old era Survivor back, that this is what it would be, I think is very disingenuous.
Yeah, I think what people are saying when they're saying that is, oh, we're seeing, like, in terms of what they edit in the way we presented it, oh, it's about, loyalty and sticking to one another. They're not playing advantages, really. The fact that there was no idol play post-merge, that is old school Survivor, if you want to say it that way. But that doesn't necessarily make it good. There's a reason that they added hidden immunity idols. Because it is a recurring problem in especially seasons, in those first 10 seasons where you have, when you come into the merge and you have a tribe that has the numbers and a tribe that doesn't, they'll just stay loyal to one another and they'll just wipe out the other tribe. And there's nothing that those players can do about it. And so they introduced hidden immunity idols to be able to give players a little bit more agency in the game and to also make players consider the fact that the threat of an immunity idol is just as strong as an immunity idol itself. And so the fact that you have to consider that an immunity idol exists on its own makes the game more complex and interesting. And so I think that when we say we want old school Survivor, I don't think anyone who's saying that says they want Survivor no idols. I think they mean they want Survivor 39 days.
Mm-hmm.
We want Survivor unique locations. We want Survivor good rewards. We want Survivor
themes.
Cool challenges. We want Survivor awesome characters. We want Survivor with the really unique vibe. We want Survivor with that Survivor feeling. It's not the integrity gameplay that you then mob up on people and then you get mad at each other when they're not your buddy anymore. Sure, that was sort of a staple of the first 10 seasons of Survivor, but that's not what I think I don't think that's what the majority of people mean when they say they miss old Survivor. And I think when people say they miss old Survivor, they're not even talking about that long ago. They're talking about the heroes versus villains era. They're talking about an era in which we had idols, we had advantages, we had twists. A lot of people, when they say they miss old Survivor, they're saying they miss pre-New Era Survivor. They miss Survivor Koa Wrong. They miss Survivor David versus Goliath. They miss Survivor Millennials versus Gen X. Survivor Koa Wrong had a super idol in it. They had some twists back then that were kind of crazy. Like, we're not saying we need the game to be dumbed down and simplified to nothing. We're just saying we miss Survivor when it felt like Survivor. So I think people that are saying like, oh, this is Survivor, I don't think those people know. I don't think they really understand what Survivor is, what Survivor was, and I think they're just, I don't understand that point, and so I agree with you that I think that's a dumb argument to bring up when we're talking about this season and to try to justify the edit that we're being presented. Because I think just because it looks like seasons we've had before doesn't make it good. Because there have been other bad seasons.
Yeah, I agree. Well, we talked about Mitch and his boot. Do we want to move on and talk about the Final Four elimination?
Yes. So Final Four is interesting because if there wasn't this weird perception of Mitch where everyone felt like they needed to get rid of Mitch, Final Four doesn't become this 2v2 duo stalemate thing. But then maybe it still does because Kyle and Kamilla don't want to go to the end together. And it just feels like there's so many interesting dynamics in this Final Five and Final Four that I feel like were not truly explored up until this point. and not explored even until Mitch went out. But now that we're down to this final 4, it gets very interesting because on the surface, you got Joe and Eva versus Kyle and Kamilla. And you just think it's going to be 2v2, and that's the way it's going to play out. One of them's going to win, take the pair, send the other 2 to fire. But that's not the way that it's going to go down. That's the way it's going to go down if Joe or Eva win. But that's not the way it's going to go down if Kyle or Kamilla win. Which makes this a very unique Final 4 in terms of like a 2-2 split. Maybe the most unique Final 4 2-2 split that I've seen. Because it's not common for a pair, for a duo, to agree that they can't go to the end together and to be kind of okay with it. Normally they have to turn on one another. Like, it's not uncommon for a duo to turn on one another, and it'd be like maybe like Cody and Jesse, where it happens a little bit earlier and they have to flip, or Charlie and Maria and that situation, or they just go all the way to the end together. But it's so rare, and maybe this is the first time that it's ever happened like this, where they just mutually agree that they cannot go to the end together, and they're both okay with one of them going to the jury. Which is, it was truly, I don't even know the right word. Bizarre is kind of just the best word I have. It was very weird to see, because it's a moment where they're both putting their collective game above their individual game. And you don't see that very often.
Yeah. Think Camilla's game losing move was choosing to vote out Mitch at 5. I think she has more win scenarios and an easier time trying to get to the final 3 if Mitch is in the final 4 and any of the other 3 are gone.
Oh, I agree. 1,000%.
So I think Kamilla kind of shot herself in the foot with her choosing to vote out Mitch, because nobody was going to take her. She was making fire in every scenario.
Yeah, the only thing that I was thinking is, like, if Joe would maybe want one last move, and go take out Kyle, would be the only way. But I think there's no scenario in that final 4 where she isn't making fire unless she wins. And so it's the sort of thing where if Mitch is there, there are a lot more scenarios compared to one. So I agree. I think she kind of screwed herself by not keeping Mitch around. But I guess the threat of Mitch being there was greater in their eyes, because she would rather Kyle win the money than anyone else there, right? And she felt like if Mitch was at the end, Kyle couldn't win the money, is the way that they saw it. Or if Mitch was at the end, she couldn't win the money. Basically, if Mitch is at the end, it cannibalizes votes for any Siva. And so the money immediately goes to Joe or Eva in their eyes. And so she's like, that is a worse outcome than a guaranteed shot at the money going to Kyle or herself. Is the only way I understand that decision.
Yeah.
But I mean, game-losing moves were made well before this by not taking out. Joe probably should have gone out. We've talked about this before, much earlier. But Kyle played the game in such an interesting way where he never needed to take out Joe, which feels what would be the obvious move, right? You take out Joe.
I think that's probably what people's biggest frustration with the entire season. And I think looking back now, what makes Kyle an even better winner is because of the fact that the way they portrayed it was that Joe was the front runner for so long.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone was getting pissed off week after week after week of them saying, now we need to take out Joe. Now is the time to take out Joe. Now we got to make a move against Joe. And then the predictable vote happens. But the fact that Kyle had the forethought to know that Joe wasn't actually the front runner and to know that he could beat him and to think it's kind of like the reverse shield strategy, or what Kalen in Australian Survivor, what he got dinged for a lot when he was talking about the shield strategy. Usually, like with the shield, you take them far and then you drop them. You don't usually take the shield with you because usually the shield's going to win.
Mm-hmm.
But in this case, it feels like a rare time where he was using Joe as a shield, but he secretly was a bigger threat to win than the shield.
Yeah, well, and I think a big part of that was because he was able to be making moves through Joe without Joe knowing the entirety of the move. The Shaheen vote is the big one, right? Is that him and Kamilla were able to convince Joe and Eva to vote out a core alliance member. And he basically had Joe, he knew that he had Joe eating out of the palm of his hand.
Mm-hmm.
And so he knew, I think once he got Shaheen out, he knew if he's sitting at the end or if Kamilla's sitting at the end with Joe and Eva, they have $1 million check written in their name. Because I don't think anyone can give the money to the other two when they were played so well by Kyle and Kamilla, when they were duped. And it's just, how can you give them the money? They didn't know what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
They were not playing the same game. And so he knew that he had won it. And so there's no benefit to taking anyone else to the end. And then the other thing is, I think he knew that Joe was probably never going to turn on him, is the other part. And part of why he kept Joe for so long. If you look back even earlier, there were opportunities when Shaheen was around and even before that where you could make a move against Joe, but instead they keep taking these easy moves. But it's one of those things where it's like you take the easy move because I think he was very confident that Joe's not going to turn on him. And sure, a duo in Joe and Eva is scary, but he's confident that to that point, he's played a better game. He has a secret duo in Kamilla, so they have a block of 2 votes where they at least have, it's almost like he's got an extra vote. And so he feels like they have enough power to combat that duo, and they have more power because it's not public. And they know that there's probably not any other advantages out there because they know Eva has it. And so because he's in a place where he feels like he has so much knowledge, in Survivor, knowledge is power, right? They say that all the time. They named an advantage after that, right? And he has knowledge, he has power, and so he feels like he controls the game. And so it makes sense to just carry Joe to the end. And I understand that you don't want to show a lot of that thinking because it could be too revealing that Kyle's going to be the winner. But I really wish they would have just shown us more of that thought process and line of thinking in him wanting to keep Joe all the way to the end because he knew he could beat him. And they kind of touched on that some. But really, the way they made it seem was like he wanted to keep Joe because he told things to Joe that he never told anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they kept saying. And I'm like, well, that's a dumbass reason to keep Joe.
Exactly. Yeah, he was like, he opened up to him about being incarcerated and stuff like that. And then I was like, yeah, you formed a good relationship with him. But just having a personal relationship with someone, you're out there to play Survivor. You're competing for $1 million. You can buy him something pretty to say you're sorry whenever you get off the island and win. So I agree. I think his justification, or his supposed justification for wanting to keep Joe around, was dumb and downplayed Kyle's strategic acumen. What?
Saying that, man, you need to watch Palau, bro. Thinking about giving up $1 million to say you're sorry. There's something actually insane in Palau that, yeah, you got to get to that season. It's pretty crazy. It literally comes down to the question: would you give up $1 million to say you're sorry? If you broke someone's trust, and then you were like, you know what, I feel really bad about that, so I'm going to give up $1 million to earn that trust back. Would you do it? I don't care. It's $1 million. Survivor was a different game back then, I guess.
Yeah, I was about to
like crazy.
If we're talking real world, people that I'm close with, I don't know. But
yeah, in the game of Survivor, someone you've known for, I guess at that point, right, like 37 days, 38 days, yeah, or at that point, yeah, 37 days. Like, come on, it's $1 million. Sure, they'll forgive you. It's okay.
Well, I mean, look at Charlie and Maria.
This wasn't even
on that scale.
No, no, and that wasn't even Charlie and Maria. Maria had no reason to be
bitter,
salty. Yeah, Charlie just played the game.
And Maria was pissed about that.
Yeah, I don't know. You saying that just makes me think about the final four of Palau, which gets kind of crazy. Or final three of Palau. Yeah, it gets pretty wild. This final four, though, is very bizarre. Kyle ends up winning it, and then sends Kamilla to fire versus Eva.
Mm-hmm.
Takes Joe. And that shocked the jury a lot. Seemed like they were very surprised that he did that. I think they were very much expecting him to take Kamilla and send Joe and Eva to duke it out.
I don't think that they expected him to recognize. Well, at that point, they still didn't know that Kyle and Kamilla were working together. So they figured he would have brought Kamilla because he identified her as he would have identified her as a non-threat, because they still wouldn't have known about their relationship at this point.
I think everyone on the jury has an idea, because David had already sort of sniffed it out. And so they're all over there. I think everyone over there has a decent idea, and they're putting pieces together, but no one knows the extent of it until Final Tribal.
Mm-hmm.
Or actually, no, until Kamilla goes to Ponderosa.
Yeah.
Is really when they find out the true extent of the relationship.
Yeah.
But I think that it's just on paper, you send the duo, the very visible public duo, and you make them fight it out. That's what you do. And you don't take the person who has won a bunch of challenges up to this point and has been your main challenge competition. It's counterintuitive to the way that you would typically make that decision. So I think they were a little surprised by that. But the jury did say that if Kamilla had been in the final three, she would have won. And so I think they were also probably a little bit disappointed, because they're like, dang, now Kamilla's got to make fire. And so I think they were probably all rooting for Kamilla in that scenario, because they wanted to give Kamilla the money.
I didn't really know how much they were rooting for Kamilla until they showed the jury when she lost. The jury looked devastated.
Yeah.
I was like, dang.
The money was Kamilla's. I think that the money was Kamilla's, even if she's sitting there with Kyle. I think it's really close. I think Joe gets maybe Cedric's vote, and then it's probably a close vote between the two of them, but I think the votes probably still go to Kamilla. I think that they might not even need to cannibalize in that scenario, because I don't know how much Eva's going to be able to do to sway votes to Joe over on the jury, which is part of the concern. Is if Eva goes over there, can she get people to vote for Joe? I don't know how much she's going to be able to do. If Joe goes over there, he might be able to get votes over to Eva because Eva already got votes on her own. But I think that Kamilla probably wins in any scenario where she's in the final three.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where I kind of just wish Survivor 50 was just New Era All-Stars.
I know. We've talked about season 50 ad nauseum, and we're about to have an episode that will have come out about our cast predictions, and the actual cast may even come out before this episode gets out. But I think it was a mistake to do a Survivor 50-esque season where you're revisiting all the eras of Survivor before doing a New Era All-Stars. I think 40, 47, or 48, probably 47, should have been New Era All-Stars. You got 6 seasons to choose from. They did season 7 as All-Stars at the very beginning. Or was season 8 All-Stars?
It was season 8.
Okay.
7 was Pearl Islands.
Well, that's fine because I have season 47 way more than 48. So scrap season 48. Put in New Era All-Stars as season 48. I know they don't to do returnee seasons that close together, but I think you can make an exception because it is season 50. But I think season 48 having been a New Era All-Stars would have been a perfect homage to the OG All-Stars, because whenever season 41 happened, Jeff was all about drop the 4, keep the 1. It's a new game. It's a new thing. And I think it would have been very refreshing to see a New Era All-Stars before season 50. I think it makes logistical and logical sense to have done that.
I think it needed to be 49. I think having this dead season in the middle is kind of weird. And I think that's ultimately why they didn't do that. But I think if you do New Era All-Stars in 48, or not 48, in 49, and then you do season 50, you do them back-to-back, you're already recording them, you're filming them back-to-back. I think that is really interesting and compelling. And then you have 50, you have the opportunity to bring back a lot more older historical players because you're getting your fill of New Era players in 49. You can bring back, maybe there's some people that you're like, hey, we'll bring you in both of them. You can come play in both. You'll do one and then you'll do the other. Or you can be an alternate for the second one, but depending on how you do. If you go really long and you don't feel like playing, whatever. They could always work that out, I'm sure. But there can be New Era players in 50, but it doesn't have to be half the cast in Survivor 50 because you're going to have an entire season of returnees immediately beforehand. No one's going to feel like they're missing out on their favorite players. I think that was 1,000,000% the way to do it. And I think they really dropped the ball on not doing a New Era All-Stars at 49 and then Survivor 50, landmark season, like honor the history of Survivor, hit all the biggest players, and then just keep going.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Kamilla, if they do a New Era All-Stars at some point in the next several seasons, I think she's got to come back.
Mm-hmm.
She's great. Bummer she got eliminated, but I think she was right in that, like, her being on the jury is really what sells Kyle's win ultimately. And I think
you
very
see
well for him.
You can literally see the moment on Joe and Eva's face when they realize they lost.
Yep.
Like you literally watch it in real time. And I thought it was funny.
Joe's head just drops.
Mm-hmm.
He just looks at his feet. And Eva's face, she just looks like she's about to cry.
Mm-hmm.
They know that it's over.
Yeah.
Because Camilla's up there just... Actually, Kyle, why don't you tell us your side of this story?
You see how that works, Maria? That's how you ride for your number one.
Yeah. So easy.
Maria, they can never make me like you.
I'm not that mad, though. I like Kinsey.
I love Kenzie. I'm not going to lie. I think Kenzie is a great winner. But I think in terms of robbed players, Charlie is probably pretty up there. Because I don't say any of this to throw shade at Kenzie's game. I think she played a great game. The jury voted the way they voted. Kenzie deserved to win. But the fact that the reason that Charlie lost is the reasoning of Charlie's loss is what makes me upset.
Well, I wish that Maria would have just admitted that she just was mad at Charlie. She
and
didn't
not
try
and
to,
not
like,
it was the
disguise
fire. It was the fire in her eyes when she made fire against Liz that won me over.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyways, we're talking about 48. Do you want to talk a little bit about the final tribal council?
Yep.
And the fact that it was really short. Felt like a very odd final tribal council. I don't know if you felt the same way, but it did not feel like a normal final tribal. It was short, and some of their questions were weird, and we can talk about David and his bit that was so dumb.
I literally, when it started and he was still sitting there with the scowl on his face, like straight up mewing, and he's been doing this since he was voted out, still just like, this has got to be a bit. I'm just like, I can't. I'm like, he's driving me insane. And then he just says knock knock. I've never wanted to punch someone so much bigger than me so much in my life. It pissed me off. I was like, come on, bro. Like, and no one knew how to react. They were like, what? And his joke didn't even make sense. Knock knock, who's there?
Not me.
You've been on the jury for how long, and that's the best you came up with? Are you kidding? You have your phone. Google. Come on, bro.
ChatGPT could have written a better joke.
It's so annoying.
I am attempting to be a bitter juror on Survivor. Can you give me a funny way to address the final three when I ask my jury question?
It's like, yeah, I'm pretending to be bitter, but I'm going to reveal myself. What's the best way to break the facade? Yeah, no, that was so dumb. I think what stood out to me, I didn't really notice the time spent in tribal or anything. What I noticed was it felt to me like Eva actually had a really good final tribal.
I think she did too until she got undermined. But
yes,
up until that point, I think she had a pretty solid final tribal.
I think she did like a really good job, like selling her game and, you know, making her points and clear. Like, I think she won votes, and I was very impressed because coming into the episode, I was fully expecting Eva to be a 0 vote final tribal finisher. I was not expecting her to be second place. And so I think that she did like very well in final tribal given what she was able to do, especially considering she didn't know what Kyle and Kamilla were about to pull.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think Joe went in thinking he had everything figured out, and as soon as he realized he knew nothing, I think he just was like, nope, game over. I think he was expecting probably no votes, and then he got Cedric's grace vote.
I think also what was weird was the one interaction, or I thought the responses were weird. Whenever, I don't remember whose question was it. Was it Chrissy's or Star's? Where they were asking, tell me one thing that's going to shock me. I think it was Chrissy's question. And Kyle's response was that he was a lawyer. And I mean, I guess the jury already knew about it, but I thought that would have been a better time to bring up him and Camilla's relationship. But I thought it was weird that his response to that question was something that was outside of the game. And then it also felt weird that Eva interrupted him and interjected and was like, hey, guess what? I'm also a super smart student. You thought I was just a student, but I'm actually like a very smart student. And I was like,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah, that whole interaction, it was very bizarre. And I mean, again, the editing of everything, the final tribal was just kind of edited funky, and there was a lot of the edit of final tribal was given to Eva. And they do that a lot because they want you to think, oh my God, Eva's going to win this. And it's not, it's Kyle. But they disproportionately edit it a lot of times towards someone who doesn't get the votes. That's pretty typical, where they try to fool you in the edit. But we know that the tribal council, the final tribal, usually goes hours sometimes. And they're having to condense it down to minutes. And so they're picking and choosing what they want to show. And they chose to show a lot more Eva there than Kyle. And I think that was just purely to really build up tension and make it seem like, oh my God, look, Eva could win this thing. But ultimately it was just Kyle. Mm-hmm. One interesting thing, though, is Joe really didn't want to own up to his game. And I just think he was never going to... I'm so interested to see if he's in 50, how he plays, having seen this season now, because he did not own any of the betrayals that he had over the course of the season. Like, he betrayed people, but he refused to own up to that. And the jury was not impressed by his refusal to own up to anyone he betrayed. And I think he had a good challenge resume, and then he had his loyalty and integrity story, but that was kind of it. He didn't have anything else to his game at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. And so I wonder how he's going to course correct if he's on 50, or if he's going to try to play the same game.
Yeah. He seems like the kind of person who I don't know if he'd learn, honestly.
I think he is going to try to link up. I think he's going to link up with Colby, Jonathan, whatever. He's going to find those meatheads, whoever's on his tribe. He's going to try to do the same thing again. I have a hard time seeing him changing things up. If he was smart, he would 180, go in with the perception, play that up, make people think that he's playing a really strong integrity game, but then play it as a villain. Mm-hmm. I don't think he has that in him.
Yeah.
But if you want to win the game, I think that's how you do it.
Well, last thing that I think we should do is place Kyle in our ever-growing tier list of Survivor winners.
I've been editing it as I've been watching through these old seasons, so it's grown a lot more for me.
Yeah.
But I won't necessarily mention those players if we don't want to. But yes, I do have a tier list that has everyone in it, except I haven't put Palau in it yet. And I did add a tier since last time we did this.
What tier?
So I added a tier called They Are a Player That Won the Game. That is between fine/unoffensive and bad. So we have Idle, where no one exists yet. We have Hall of Fame, great, good, fine/unoffensive. They are a player that won the game, and bad. And I do think as time passes, I want to reevaluate some of these. Like, every time we get a new winner, I think we can reevaluate the new era winners, mm-hmm. because we have more things to adjust them to. Because I think we have Rachel too high based on where we put her last time.
Where did we put her last time?
So we have Dee and Rachel both in Hall of Fame.
Oh, yeah. I would not put Rachel that high.
I would not either. I don't know. I don't remember what we were talking about.
Yeah, what was our reasoning for that?
I don't know. But we put her way up there last time. I think we were just really big on Rachel winning over... I guess we thought it was going to be Andy at one point, and we were high on the Genevieve train, but we knew Genevieve wasn't going to win, and we were just gung-ho about Rachel. And I think Rachel played a good game, but it's not a Hall of Fame Survivor game. That's for sure. So I think Rachel definitely needs to come down into a different tier. the next new era survivor in a tier, we have Marianne in the great tier. We have Jam Jam and Kinsey in the good tier. We have Erica in fine/unoffensive. And we have Gabler in they are a player that won the game. He was in fine/unoffensive, but I created this tier and put him in it because there are a couple other players from older seasons that I was, they're not bad, but I would say that they are a little bit more than fine. You know, they exist in the realm of their
winners.
own. Yeah. So I think if we were to just re-rank new era winners, I think maybe that's how we can end this. Maybe we re-rank new era winners, and then we can kind of place them amongst other winners in Survivor history.
Mm-hmm.
So clearly, I think D, best new era winner. And I think Kyle's win, I think, sits right below D's.
Yeah.
I think that they're very close. But I do think that there is a tier difference in terms of overall Survivor wins. If we're going to have D in Hall of Fame, I think that Kyle would be in great.
Mm-hmm.
Is probably where my brain goes.
Yeah. I would bump Rachel down to good.
I agree. I think that we were smoking something. Would you have Rachel? I would have Rachel below Jam Jam. Would you have Rachel above or below Kinsey?
I'd probably have her above Kinsey.
I agree. Okay. So I'm going to sandwich Rachel between Jam Jam and Kinsey. I'm gonna make a bold move and move Vesepia up to Hall of Fame because I just feel very strongly that it belongs up there instead of at the top of great. Because the more I think about it, I just think that's a Hall of Fame game. I think that's a great.
I mean, it was the first of its kind. It's
legendary.
It shaped the way that people played the game from there on out.
It's a legendary game.
First ever win from the bottom.
Yeah, legendary. Man, we need to revisit this whole list. This whole list is whack. The more things we've added to this is crazy to me.
Yeah, maybe we should probably... Well, that's an episode in and of itself.
Yeah, but you need to catch up because I'm so many seasons ahead of you.
I know. I'll work on it.
Yeah, you're not working fast enough, buddy.
All right. I'm fine having Kyle in the great tier. Who is his company in the great tier?
I have Sandra from Pearl Islands, Ethan from Africa, and then we have Marianne from 43.
Okay.
And this is where I'm thinking this whole list is kind of weird because Tina is not in here and Richard Hatch are both in good and not great. And I'm wondering what are our, like, right now we have Tina. It's so hard to compare these, but we have Richard Hatch and Tina on the same level as Jam Jam, Rachel, and Kinsey. Those are all in the same tier.
Yeah.
And it's like...
That feels weird.
And I have a hard time saying that Richard Hatch played the same level of game as Kinsey. As much as I love Kinsey, Richard's game was the game. It is the reason Survivor exists. But then there's also this level of, well, you got to adjust for era.
Yeah.
And then you also have to think about the fact that, well, we can't look at it through the rose-colored glasses of nostalgia. So it becomes very hard to rate these all in one line.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we probably definitely need to have a new era list that's just new era. That's probably the easiest list to have.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can try to interject them in these older seasons. But it becomes really hard to rate to mix these two eras, especially on the polar opposite ends. The first 10 seasons and these most recent 7 seasons, 8 seasons, that becomes very, very difficult.
Well, maybe that can be a task for down the line of reevaluating how we would want to rank these winners.
Yeah. My plan, I'm trying to watch all the seasons before 50. That's my goal. I'm powering through all of them before 50. At the very least, I'm going to watch every season that all the players who
who
appear
are
in 50 are in.
Yeah.
Whether I've seen them before or not. I'm watching through them all. So right now I'm just watching through them all in order. If it comes down to it and I have to skip some seasons and come back to get done in time, I'll hit the ones with players who are in 50, so that way I can have them all fresh on my mind. But I think that as we get up to 50, that'd probably be a very interesting episode to start thinking through how we rank all players ever, because that's not controversial at all.
It's subjective. Or I meant to say objective.
It is objective truth that Brian is at the bottom of the list right now. So I'm sorry, everyone. I have Brian as the only person in bad tier. If you like Brian Heideck,
you're weird.
I'm sorry. Thailand, bad season.
Yeah.
And Brian, not good person. Even though he did play a pretty good game, he's a bad winner. Should have been Sheehan, but she was voted out way earlier. She didn't make it close.
I was about to say, she was not in the final two.
No. Nowhere close.
Well, I think there's lots of things that we could say about season 48 and the trajectory that Survivor is on, but I think our time would be better well spent reflecting on just 48 and what we have talked about, and devoting an entire other episode discussing the impact that 48 has had on Survivor as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
And the trajectory that it feels like we are on in the aftermath of 48.
Yeah.
Because I'm not liking where we're going.
Yeah, and I think that's something we'll probably be talking. Right now, I don't want to get into freakout mode, obviously, because Survivor, they're going to have bad seasons. But they almost always will bounce back. I was just talking about Brian, right? Thailand is not a good season. But it is sandwiched between Marquesas, which I guess Marquesas isn't amazing, but it's pretty good. And then it's followed up by Amazon, which is good. And then followed that up with Pearl Islands, which is I think that's probably my favorite out of the first 10 seasons. And then followed that up with All Stars. Like, they went on a generational run immediately after Thailand. And so I think that if we're feeling this same way after 49, then I think we go into crisis mode and we're like, okay, everything hinges on 50. But I am willing to just go with the flow and wait and see what happens with 49, because Survivor's going to have its ups and downs. 41, 42 were downs, right? It took time for them to get on the rails, and then they started coming back up. There's going to be downs. It's always going to be a roller coaster. And like it or not, we're riding that roller coaster. And right now we're in a dip, and I really hope that Riz God can save us in Survivor 49.
Save us, Riz God, please.
I think before we end this, though, I do want to ask, as we look at this whole season, who were your favorite players of Survivor 48? We've kind of talked about this, but if you could pick one or two players, who do you want back? One player from pre-merge, one player from post-merge. Who would you want back the most, and why?
Post-merge, Kamilla. There's no argument there. If not the obvious Kamilla, honestly, I'd probably say David, just because I think he's fun television.
He definitely makes for interesting television, that's for sure.
He's not good at Survivor. He was the only one who sniffed out Kyle and Camilla's alliance, but he was very interesting to watch.
Yeah.
And it was, if anything, it was refreshing to see someone who wasn't a super fan. So that's my reasoning. Pre-merge, I'd say or Thomas, probably.
Okay.
But I think we had talked about, I don't know if we talked about it on the pod or off the pod. The thing about with Thomas, I think he was really fun TV when we had him, but he feels the kind of player who's never going to make it past the pre-merge ever.
Yeah.
But I really liked him for the time that we had him.
Yeah.
And then Say was just chaos, but in a good way. In a bad way at first, but then she grew on me a lot.
Yeah.
And I think in a different cast, she could thrive.
I agree. Yeah. No, I think that's good. I'll pick two more that are just different from yours, just to put out two different names. So two other ones that I think would be great. Charity from our pre-merge, I think would be so fun to have back. I would love to see Charity get another shot. And then post-merge, I would love to see Shaheen again. I think would be really cool. He's one of those ones that I'd love to see Shaheen again. Also Mary, if I was throwing in even another one. Mary. There's a lot of players from the season, like even though the season as a whole didn't work, and we have so many gripes with it, I do think there's a weird world where this cast does work. I just think they went out in the wrong order. And I think maybe they started out on the wrong tribes. And I think CBS just kind of messed up. But I think the bones were there for a good season.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't think it played out in a successful way. But I think the people that they cast, because Survivor's really good at casting, I think almost any of these players would be compelling in another season.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Star would be so interesting in another season. I desperately would more screen time of Star. That's not something I necessarily thought was going to be the case coming into the season. I didn't know if Star was going to be one of my favorite players, but Star was someone that I was consistently wanting more screen time of. So I think, if anything, that's something we can give credit to for Survivor 48 is at least they did cast compelling and interesting players. It's just we didn't really get a chance to see them at their full potential.
Mm-hmm.
And so like this would be such an interesting season if they were to just run it back, but we shuffle things up at the start a different way, different tribes, different, that would be in a different universe. Survivor 48 might be the best Survivor season ever. I think the very, very last thing that I have is, given the season we have, where would you rank it among other New Era seasons?
I mean, it's bottom 3.
I think it's bottom 2.
You think it's with this and 43? Or
43?
Sorry, 41?
Yeah. This and 41. I don't think there's anything that's in the same tier as these two. I think it's this and 41, and then I have to weigh what is more important. Honestly, like a better cast with more strategy and gameplay in 41,
or a really good winner.
Well, no, not even that. Because honestly, I think Erica's a good winner. We just didn't see her, like the editing. Both seasons had bad editing.
Yes.
So they have that in common, right? But it was the overabundance of twists and the game not, like the New Era, not having figured itself out yet. And so it's like, it's a problem with like core mechanics of Survivor in 41.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in this one, a lot of it comes down to the edit, and then in the way we're presented the cast and their relationships with one another and dynamics between them, and some alliances and how stale the gameplay feels.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think just on paper, 41 is kind of a more fun season to watch. I would rather watch 41 than 48. If I was showing someone Survivor, right? And your only two options, you had 2 DVDs or Blu-rays. We don't watch DVDs in this house.
Mm-hmm.
You have 2 Blu-rays. One is Survivor 41, one is Survivor 48. And this is their first introduction to Survivor. And unfortunately, these are the 2 options you have. Which one would you rather show them?
Yeah.
I would rather show them 41.
I would rather show them 41.
Because I can always asterisk, all right, hey, this stupid hourglass thing
doesn't come back.
That they do this twice and then it's gone forever. You know, these journey things, they slow those down a lot. Which, like, speaking of barely any journeys this season, that was actually kind of interesting. They stopped doing those really quick. Yeah, I think like that would be, but like the players and the moves and strategy, and it was just far more compelling as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just think it's a more fun season to watch. And so, yeah, whenever I look at it that way, it's like, unfortunately, I probably put 48 on the bottom, just looking at it that way.
Yeah.
Which is a bummer because it's got the second best winner. And that's crazy.
Yeah, I don't know. There's so much that so many gripes about it. I think we have exhausted all of our...
Yeah, we beat the horse to a pulp at this point.
It's not recognizable as a horse anymore.
Yeah.
Well, before we part ways with what has been a season of Survivor.
Yeah, one of the 48 seasons.
Do you have any parting words for 48?
Goodbye, 48. Charity was gone too soon. The 0 confessional stat still holds strong.
Yeah.
Come on, Riz God. I am ready for you.
Save us.
That's all I have to say.
I think those are good last words that you just read over 48's casket.
Yes.
It was a closed casket. It was too ugly to look at. So, we hope you enjoyed this season review, overview, analysis, whatever you want to call it, of Survivor 48. We have enjoyed talking about it more than we have enjoyed watching it. I would probably say. So, if you enjoyed listening to us more than you enjoyed watching Survivor 48, we would really appreciate a rating/review as it helps our podcast grow. Additionally, you can follow us wherever you're listening to this podcast to stay up to date whenever we release new episodes. We have some ideas cooking up for episodes that we're going to release in the off season, so be following us to stay tuned for that. And follow us on social media on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, all that stuff at Idle Talk Podcast. And we will catch y'all in the next one.